The queen begged for someone to choose her daughter. No one expected me to rise and claim her. The desperate summons. The crystalline throne room of Celestara shimmered with an otherworldly luminescence, its walls catching and refracting the light from Nebulon Prime through countless facets. Nobles from across the 7 systems had gathered, their exotic forms draped in fabrics that shifted colors with each movement. At the center of it all, Empress Mithra Christian stood, her silver skin gleaming with an inner radiance that betrayed her emotional state. "Please," her voice resonated through the hall, carrying a desperation that made even the proudest lords shift uncomfortably. "My daughter has refused every suitor for 3 cycles. The bloodline of Christian must continue, yet she turns away princes and warriors alike. I beg you, someone must win her heart before the convergence ends our dynasty." Princess Solara stood beside her mother, her violet eyes distant and cold. Her ethereal beauty was undeniable, skin like liquid moonlight, hair that flowed like starlight itself. Yet there was a fierce intelligence burning behind those eyes, a spirit that refused to be bartered for political gain. She had memorized every face in the crowd, knew their ambitions, their shallow desires. None stirred even the slightest flutter in her hearts. The silence stretched painfully until the great doors burst open. A human male strode in, his worn leather jacket completely out of place among the silk and crystal finery. Darius Valin moved with the confidence of someone who had faced death and laughed. His dark hair was tousled from space travel, his green eyes scanning the room with amused interest. "Forgive the intrusion, Your Majesty," he said, his voice carrying a rough charm. "I came to deliver a shipment of Terran spices, but I couldn't help overhearing your plea." He paused, his gaze finding Solara's. Something electric passed between them, a recognition neither expected. "I'll take up your challenge." Gasps echoed through the hall. A human? Claiming the princess of Celestara? Commander Zephyr Torren's hand moved to his plasma blade, his forearms tensing with barely contained rage. But Solara, for the first time in cycles, Solara's expression changed. A slight widening of her eyes, a barely perceptible intake of breath. "You dare," the Empress began, but stopped when she saw her daughter's face. There was something there, curiosity, interest. It was more than anyone else had managed to invoke. The shock of choice. The court erupted in outrage. Lords and ladies who had remained silent during the Empress's plea now found their voices, scandalized by the human's audacity. Darius stood unmoved by the chaos, his eyes never leaving Solara's face. She studied him in return, noting the scars that spoke of adventures, the confident stance that suggested he feared nothing in the galaxy. "A human cannot possibly understand our ways," Commander Torren stepped forward, his military bearing imposing. His skin shifted from blue to deep purple, a sign of his agitation. "This is an insult to our entire civilization. I demand the right to remove this interloper." "You demand." Solara's voice cut through the noise like a blade through silk. She descended the crystalline steps, each movement graceful and deliberate. "Since when does anyone make demands regarding my choices, Commander?" She circled Darius slowly, her assessment both regal and intensely personal. He turned with her, maintaining eye contact, a slight smile playing at his lips. When she stopped directly in front of him, close enough that he could see the swirling galaxies in her pupils, she spoke again. "You're either very brave or very foolish, human." "Probably both," Darius admitted, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "But when I walked in and saw you, I knew I had to take the chance. There's something about you, something that calls to the adventurer in me." Her breath caught. No one had ever spoken to her of adventure, of calling. They spoke of duty, bloodlines, political advantage. This human saw something different in her, something wild and free. "Mother," Solara turned to the Empress, her decision made. "I accept his suit for consideration." The Empress's expression cycled through surprise, concern, and finally, a calculating acceptance. "Very well. The human will have 7 rotations to prove his worth. But know this, trader, if you fail, if you bring shame upon my daughter, there is no corner of the galaxy where you will be safe from my wrath." Lady Nixara Voss watched from the shadows, her mind already spinning webs of intrigue. This unexpected development could be useful. A human suitor would never be accepted by the council, which meant opportunity for those clever enough to seize it. She smiled, her pointed teeth gleaming. The dance of hearts. The crystal gardens of the palace existed in a bubble of perpetual twilight, where bioluminescent flowers pulsed with gentle rhythms and fountains sang with liquid mercury. Solara had escaped here after the court session, needing space to process the day's events. She wasn't surprised when footsteps approached. Somehow, she'd known he would find her. "The guards tried to stop me," Darius said, settling beside her on the bench carved from a single amethyst. "I convinced them that getting to know the princess was part of proving my worth." "And how did you manage that?" she asked, amused despite herself. "I may have mentioned that denying me would suggest they didn't trust their princess's judgment." His grin was roguish. "Also, I brought them earth chocolate. Amazing what doors that opens." She laughed, actually laughed, for the first time in months. The sound was like silver bells, and it made something warm bloom in Darius's chest. They talked as the garden lights shifted through spectrum of colors, sharing stories of their different worlds. He told her of Earth's blue skies and vast oceans. She described swimming through Celestara's crystal caves where sound became visible. "Why did you really stand up?" Solara asked as the conversation lulled. "Don't tell me it was just my beauty. You don't strike me as someone swayed by surfaces." Darius was quiet for a moment, considering. "When I was young, I watched my sister forced into a marriage she didn't want. I couldn't stop it then, I was just a kid. But I swore I'd never stand by and watch it happen again. When I saw you up there, gorgeous yes, but also, trapped. I recognized that look." She turned to him fully then, seeing him truly for the first time. Not just the handsome rogue who'd burst into court, but someone who understood cages and the desire to break free. Moving without conscious thought, she leaned closer. "You're not what I expected," she whispered. "Neither are you," he replied, his hand reaching up to cup her cheek, marvel at the silk-smooth texture of her skin. Their lips met under the swirling lights of the nebula above, a kiss that bridged two worlds. It was tender and fierce simultaneously, speaking of possibility and promise. When they parted, both were breathing unsteadily. Neither noticed Lady Nyxara watching from the shadows, her expression calculating. The trial of worthiness. The council had convened to set 3 trials for the human suitor, tests designed, Commander Torren ensured, to be impossible for someone without Celestran abilities. The first was the trial of memory, where Darius would need to navigate the maze of mirrors, a crystalline labyrinth that showed infinite reflections and false paths. Solara watched from the observation platform, her hands clenched. She'd tried to warn him, but Torren had kept them apart all morning. The commander stood beside her, his satisfaction poorly concealed. "When he fails," Torren murmured, "you'll see that humans are weak. Then perhaps you'll consider a proper match." Darius entered the maze, immediately assaulted by thousands of his own reflections. But instead of being disoriented, he pulled out a small device, a sonic mapper he'd modified from his ship's equipment. The sound waves revealed the true paths, and he moved through with surprising efficiency. What should have taken hours took minutes. The second trial was combat. Here, Torren was certain the human would fall. But Darius had spent years learning fighting techniques from dozens of species. When faced with a Celestran warrior, he didn't try to match their strength. He used their momentum against them, applying techniques from Earth's Aikido combined with Martian gravity combat. For the final trial, diplomacy, Lady Nyxara had secretly poisoned the ceremonial wine Darius was to share with the council, hoping to eliminate both the human and cast suspicion on Solara's judgment. But Darius's years of trading had given him a nose for deception. He detected the bitter undertone and smoothly switched the cups when demonstrating Earth's customs of toasting. When Nyxara collapsed, revealing her treachery, the court was stunned. Darius had not only completed the trials but exposed a traitor. Solara could barely contain her pride and relief, but it was her mother's expression that surprised everyone. The Empress was smiling. "You used technology, cunning, and experience," Empress Mithra noted. "Not traditional methods, but effective ones. Perhaps that's what our bloodline needs, innovation rather than tradition." Commander Torren's complexion darkened to near black with rage. "This proves nothing." He's still just a human. And yet he succeeded where you assumed he'd fail, Solara interjected, moving to stand beside Darius. What does that say about your judgment, Commander? The choice of love. The night before the convergence ceremony, where Solara would formally choose her consort, tension filled the palace like a charged field before a storm. Commander Tauren hadn't given up. If anything, his desperation had grown dangerous. He cornered Darius in the lower corridors, his 4 arms crackling with energy. You think you've won? Tauren snarled. I've loved her since childhood. I won't let some primitive human take what's mine. That's the problem, Darius replied calmly, though his hand rested on his plasma pistol. You think she's something to be taken. She's not a prize, Tauren. She's a person with her own choices. The fight was brief but vicious. Tauren had strength and rage, but Darius had survived too many scrapes across the galaxy to fall here. When palace guards arrived, drawn by the commotion, they found Tauren unconscious and Darius treating his own wounds. At the convergence ceremony, under the full glory of Nebulon Prime's aurora, Solara stood before the assembled nobility. She wore a gown that seemed woven from starlight itself, but it was the determination in her eyes that made her truly radiant. For too long, I've been told that duty must override desire, that tradition matters more than happiness, she began, her voice carrying across the silent crowd. But what use is a bloodline preserved without love? What strength comes from a union built on obligation alone? She extended her hand toward Darius, who stepped forward from the crowd. He'd traded his worn jacket for formal attire, but somehow managed to make even that look rakishly charming. I choose Darius Vallin, she declared. Not because he's noble, not because it's expected, but because he sees me, not just as a princess or a symbol, but as myself. Because he makes me laugh, challenges me, and shows me that the galaxy is far wider than these crystal walls. The Empress rose from her throne, and the crowd held its breath. She descended slowly, deliberately, until she stood before them both. Love, she said softly, is perhaps the greatest adventure of all. She placed her hands over theirs, blessing the union. May you find in each other the courage to face whatever comes. As Darius pulled Solara into a passionate kiss, the aurora above seemed to pulse brighter, as if the universe itself celebrated their unconventional love. In that moment, under alien stars, 2 hearts from different worlds beat as one, proving that love indeed transcends all boundaries. The end.